Thank you for listening to another episode of Remake Rewind. I'm Mike, as always. Got my buddy Alex. How are you doing, bud?
I'm doing good.
Why don't you tell us what this podcast is about, for just in case we have any first-time listeners? Because this is a pretty big episode.
Arrakis. Dune.
Not the topic. What is the podcast about? What do we do here on Remake Rewind?
Oh, I thought you were asking about what we were watching.
Actually, I had a whole thing planned for how I was going to announce what movie we were covering, and you ruined it.
Well,
I was going to go, as Rammstein would say, Dune. Dune Haas.
I'm glad I interrupted you. That's terrible. We're Remake Rewind. We're the podcast where we watch originals and remakes and talk about whether or not they should have been remade.
There you go. There you go.
And I saved all of you from listening to that fucking.
Well, I already said it, and I'm going to keep it in.
Boo.
But no, I'm really excited about this episode. This movie, Dune, the 2021 version, directed by Denis Villeneuve, has been on my most anticipated list for like 5 years, and I'm very excited to talk about this film.
Yeah. Did you read the books?
I've read the book. I've read the first 4 books, and then I never got through the fifth book. But the first book I've read 5 or 6 times, and then
Instead of reading it 5 or 6 times, why don't you read the other books?
Because they get really fucking weird, and they're not easy books to read. So even the first one is a very intimidating book for most people. It's very long. It's dense. It has a lot of breaks in the story where it just goes into like the journal of the ecologist, and there's like, it's almost like Moby Dick, where they're like, here's the anatomy of a sandworm and what it does and whatnot. And then it also has gaps where it's also the Princess Irulan who is narrating, like she wrote a book about, all the events, and so she's kind of like reading quotes from Paul. So it's a very hard read.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That just sounds like a whole lot of stuff.
And then when you get, but this first book has a lot of action, and there are some pretty cool fight scenes and the culture and everything. But then when you get to the second and third book, it just becomes like political. It's like just a political novel. And then the fourth one gets really fucking weird, where there's a human who turns himself into like a giant worm human hybrid.
Well, that's cool. I want to see that.
It gets fucking gnarly. I doubt we'll ever get that far in the movies. I think we can maybe get the first 3 books, and then it's going to get wonky. But no, I'm definitely a big fan of the series, and I've been waiting for this for a very long time.
I watched the David Lynch Dune in 2014 for the first time, and I was not super impressed with it.
So it's universal. I don't want to say universally, because my sister-in-law, it's like her favorite movie. She loves it. She named her daughter after one of the characters in the book. It's
a cult hit.
It's one of my dad's favorite movies, and I don't like a lot of stuff that my dad likes. I'm not going to go into it, but I don't have the best relationship with my dad, and so a lot of things that he likes I just automatically don't like. But the book is an exception. Like, I haven't watched this movie since I was probably in middle school or high school. The Finch version. Fincher version. What am I talking about? Lynch. Stupid idiot, Mike.
Come on, buddy.
But I mean, that movie has its own controversy. He wasn't happy with the movie. There are multiple cuts in the movie that actually are credited as directed by Alan Smithy, which, those of you not in the industry, is the credit that a director uses when they don't want any ownership or credit or claim to the movie that got made.
So, which means that somebody else directed it and just didn't put their name on it.
Exactly. So Lynch directed it, but he felt between studio involvement and their cuts and their changes that it just wasn't the movie that he set out to make or what he wanted to make. Because he absolutely did direct the film. It just, the cut and the budget and the changes is just not what his artistic vision was. What's funny is, like, David Lynch obviously isn't very fond of this movie. But it's really funny because like the star, Kyle MacLachlan, I'm going to blank. I don't remember the actor's name, but he's also in Twin Peaks. But there's two actors in this movie that he has worked with multiple times.
Yeah.
So he definitely made some friends on this set. But you can tell he directed this movie. Like there's some really weird shit. Like when Paul we'll get into the movie in a second, but like specifically the scene where Paul puts his hand in the box and all the weird psycho visions he's having of his hand burning and everything. Like that's very David Lynch.
So I haven't read the books. After watching the Villeneuve one, I guess the trippiness is like really a part of the story. Like it's in the books, right?
No, not really.
Really?
Not that. I think
doing my research and seeing the new one, that kind of felt like it was a bigger part of the story than I realized.
Did it as a slight nod to it. There is some really trippy shit in the book. I reread this last year in anticipation of the movie coming out last year, and then it got delayed. It's a long book and it's very dense, like I said. So I can't. Even though I've read it multiple times, I don't remember every detail. But I don't remember ever. Like it feels like his hand's burning. I think what they were doing is trying to put a visualization on the screen so we can see what it feels like, as opposed to just saying, "Oh, it feels like pain," because it is supposed to feel like burning. But he doesn't have like visions of it yet. But I guess we should kind of talk. Obviously, you didn't see it until 7 years ago. I had seen it a handful of times growing up as a kid. Like I said, it was my dad's favorite movie. My mom hated this movie. She used to make fun of it all the time. And the first movie's weird. It has like all these like weird inner dialogues and all these people, like the way they say the spice. Nobody just says like, "Oh man, I'm going to get some spice." It's like the spice.
The spice melange.
The spice melange. The spice. And my mom used to make fun of it. Anytime my dad talked about it, she'd just be like, "The spice."
I mean, it is a silly movie.
Oh, it's absolutely silly.
Your mom's
Toto
not
did the
wrong.
music.
Yeah, and Brian Eno.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why it has the cult following that it has, and I think if you're a David Lynch fan, aside from that too, it makes a lot more sense. But just to the movie-going public, to John Q public, it's a weird fucking movie.
It's super fucking weird.
And it's also like just the source material, not even David Lynch. Like it is hard sci fantasy.
Oh, it's super hard. I mean, a lot of people say it's what Lord of the Rings is to fantasy, Dune is to science fiction.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think that's inaccurate. But do you want to try to summarize this movie? Because even though they're based off the same source material, the plots are different. We do have to acknowledge at the front, this is only about half for the 2021 version. It's only about half the book, where the 80s version is the full book, quote unquote. But yeah, if you want to try to give it a go, don't look at Wikipedia. Just wing it, man.
I'm telling you, I'm going to do the second one. I was actually looking to see if you sent over show notes.
No, I didn't. I started a new job this week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I get to travel a lot. I'm actually going to London for a week. So I have been just trying to get caught up for traveling internationally during COVID is a nightmare.
Yeah, I don't envy you.
You have to have all your vaccines. You have to show that you don't have COVID. You have to get a COVID test. But there's a very, very small window in which you can do it because you have to do it within 3 days. But you also have to make sure you get the results in time before you go. And then you
have to get a test on top of vaccination?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Depending on what. So technically, it turns out I didn't have to. But when my tickets were booked, I had to because the rules change and they're constantly going in flux.
Yeah.
So I did it just in case. That the rules changed because as of earlier this week I required it. As of today I didn't technically require it to board, so it was a nightmare. And then there's all these special forms you have to fill out that London makes you fill out, and then I actually have to get a second COVID. I have to get a COVID test within 48 hours of arriving in London. So it's and then I had to schedule that here in America, and oh god, it's a nightmare. But so
if
no,
only people had just stayed home when it first hit.
I know, right? So I guess I will summarize this one. So this is based off the Frank Herbert novel Dune, or as Rammstein would say, Dune.
If you do that again, I'm hanging up. Podcast over.
So basically, in a nutshell, this one's very different than the book. Like the bones are there, but the movie's drastically different. So the spice is a compound that is only found on the desert planet Arrakis. It prolongs life. It gives you, if you use certain amounts of it, or if you use it in certain types of forms, it actually gives you a type of prescience, so you can kind of see the future and whatnot. And so it's imperative for space travel. It is the most valuable substance in the universe. And so the guild navigators are concerned that there's going to be this chosen one in Paul, who's played by Kyle MacLachlan. And so they're concerned that he's going to disrupt the spice flow. And the Emperor is also concerned that Paul's father is very, very popular amongst all the powerful families in the universe, and is concerned that he could dethrone him. So they set up this plot to take the planet from the Harkonnens, which are the main villains and the enemies of House Atreides. And basically the Harkonnens set up the Atreides family to fail, taking over the spice population, or the spice planet. And it's very political, but they're hoping that they'll discredit the family, kill the family, the Harkonnens can go back, and the Emperor and the guild don't have to be afraid of the Atreides anymore. So that's kind of the meat of it. And then it turns out that Paul is in fact the chosen one, and he has to get used to the desert planet, and he needs to get the help of the Fremen, who are the natives of the planet, who are very quote unquote primitive, but he needs to inspire them to overthrow the Empire.
That sounds about right to me.
That's about as simple as you can get. It's a very fucking complicated plot.
And I feel like after watching the new one, there are a lot of elements of the story that's shared by both movies that were not clear to me in the Lynch movie.
Yeah. No, like the new one, I would say, is a very unabridged version. Obviously, it's not even half the book, realistically. So it's definitely unabridged. But what's funny is a lot of the people, you need to simplify this story for your regular audience. Unless you made this a Game of Thrones and you were willing to throw, 8 years into this and put the budget into it, you can't really do this story justice. Even a miniseries is not enough to get all of the political intrigue and there's also this sect called the Bene Gesserit, which is a sisterhood.
Sect, he said.
Yep. What did it sound like? I said something else?
It sounded like sex.
Yeah, well, sex comes into play with them. So in a nutshell, the Bene Gesserit are a sisterhood.
They're witches.
They are witches to an extent, but it's more science. But it's perceived as magic
Science
to other
witch.
people. But they're secretly the ones running the universe. So they control events, and they get people to mate with different people so they can control the bloodlines, and then through their powers, they manipulate the government and whatnot. And the big deal is they're actually trying to create the chosen one, and they know it's supposed to be a male, but they didn't want it to be Paul. And his mom broke the rules and had a son when she was supposed to have daughters, because they can control that. How dare
she?
It gets weird. Like what they're actually capable of doing is it's not magic. It's that they have, over thousands and thousands of years, have figured out how to control every nerve and muscle in their body. So that way they have complete control over their body. So they really can decide, like, oh, I'm pregnant. Oh, it's a boy. I'm going to ovulate this egg, even though it's already impregnated, kind of thing. So like that's the level of control over their body that they have. They can,
which is like not really in this movie.
No. Well, in this movie, they completely change it, because they were supposed to they have the voice and they can have this control, but they change it and give them like sonic weapons. So like the heroes have microphone. They have like Madonna headsets on the whole movie, so they can control their weapons.
Weirding modulators, right?
Yeah. And the weirding literally is like a Fremen word that just means witches and everything, but it's supposed to be like they can control, with a certain pitch of their voice, they can control people. And that's probably the most magic thing they have. But yeah, in this, they were just like, no, we're just going to give them weapons they control with their voice.
Yeah.
It's super weird.
Not at the end, though. At the very end, he can do it without, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's super weird. And his name is a killing word.
What explain to me the guild navigators.
So the guild navigators, what's funny is it's interesting that you actually see them in the movie, because you don't even get a description of them until like the 5th or 6th book in the series. But the guild navigators, they're humans. They're not aliens or anything like that, but they're humans that use like just obscene amounts of the spice, and they put it in like this pure liquid form, and they actually like bathe in it, and over time it kind of mutates them. So they're supposed to have like elongated fingers and kind of fish-like features, but they are supposed to be human. But basically, they take such extreme amounts of spice that they develop basic psychic powers. So they can basically see just a little bit into the future, so that way they can find safe passage through space, so they don't collide with asteroids or collide with little particles, and they can find the wormholes and all the ways to get through without getting hurt. But they have to do.
That's the guy in the fishbowl at the beginning of the movie?
Correct. So they are the most powerful.
What's their relation to the Emperor, though?
So basically the way it works is the only way you can travel vast distances in space is with that. And the guild, so there's a guild that runs all space travel. And so they basically, they're just as powerful as the Emperor, because even the Emperor has to pay them to transport anything or to go anywhere.
I don't feel like any of that is in the movie. What you're saying to me right now is interesting, and I wish that was in the movie.
Yeah, it's definitely not.
It's neither movie, by the way.
It's actually explained a little bit in the newer one. It's not as big as it is in the book, but they do it. It's more show versus tell. Like there's a couple different points in the new one. We'll obviously get to it, where people ask, they're like, oh, they just did this, this, and this. They sent this many people. How much did that cost them? And it's like billions and billions of dollars. Yeah. So they talk about it, but they don't explicitly say it. You're right. But they cut out a lot of stuff.
Like a lot of things in the second movie, and we'll get to it, but it's outlined a little bit better. It makes a little bit more sense, even if it's not outright explained.
Yeah. God, the thing that I thought, just my first note, within 30 seconds of the movie, I was like, oh man. So Virginia Madsen is in this. She was in Candyman. She's the lead in Candyman.
Heck yeah.
She plays Princess Irulan, who ultimately at the end of the movie, and in the series, marries Paul, because like and it's also not really explained in this movie, but like he wins at the end of the day. But the big plot is supposed to be he recognizes the only way to save the universe is if he becomes emperor, and so he actually marries the princess. In the books, he refuses to sleep with her. He doesn't want her to have a son, so she has an heir, and his girlfriend Chani, and who becomes can never actually be his wife, but he keeps her around for the whole series. Same thing. His dad, the Duke, his mom is not the Duke's wife, because she's his concubine, because she's not allowed to marry him, and for political reasons he couldn't marry her. Right. So he never takes a wife, so that way Paul can be his heir, essentially. But the thing that I thought was really funny is at the beginning, the Princess Irulan, who ends up marrying Paul, she gives us this huge exposition dump about spice and space travel and the Fremen and the Bene Gesserit. It's
straight up the beginning of Star Wars, but instead of a text crawl, it's just a floating head in space.
Yeah, and she's reading it, but you can tell she didn't learn this. She's reading it off a teleprompter. There's a point where she kind of like stops and squints a little bit. Like it's only about a half a second to a second, but she like stops, squints, and then starts reading again.
It was a pregnant pause, Mike.
No, it wasn't. It was really dense, and there was no way anybody was going to remember conservatively 3 minutes of exposition.
When we watched this movie, my friend Sal and our friend AC Wings watched this in 2014. We decided that we were going to play a drinking game that we had seen online, and we were in college, you know. And,
every time they say spice?
Every time they say spice, you take a drink. If they say spice melange, I think you take 2 drinks. And if they say Shai Halud, you take a drink.
Jesus.
The first 30 seconds of this movie, we were like, oh, fuck, we're going to be fucking plastered.
Yeah.
I think we took like 15 drinks in the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, you probably took 1,000 overall with how many times they say spice.
Yeah, we don't advocate unsafe drinking on this podcast.
No. What do you think about the shields?
Odd choice. choice.
Even for the 80s, like, look, they should have just done what they did with Tron. Like, the shields only are in play for like 2 scenes for a total of less than a minute. But they just did this.
They feel like they are difficult to animate, especially in 1984.
Right, but look at what Tron did
goofy.
earlier.
Yeah, I mean,
and
there were better options.
Yeah, and by that point they had, you could do electrical effects on things. You can do force field effects. Look at Star Wars. Then this was a direct, like, we need our own Star Wars. So like this movie had the budget, but instead it does these really weird blocky, almost like Tetris blocks, like stickman blocks for when they were using the shields.
They look like the robot in Interstellar, but if he was like kind of see-through.
Yeah, except it's like really bad digital not even like 8-bit like animation
vision.
Yeah, it's bad.
That was a choice. It was interesting. It's also interesting seeing Jean-Luc Picard in there.
Yeah, he's got a little hair going. He plays Gurney Halleck.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
Gurney Halleck is such a great character, and I think both movies underutilized him and didn't really portray him, because he's a fucking fantastic character, and you don't get this in either version. But Gurney Halleck is, one of the right-hand men of Duke Leto. When all this shit goes down, when their empire, I guess it's not technically an empire, but when their operation crumbles because of a traitor, Gurney Halleck thinks it's Paul's mom, Jessica. And that's like a huge part of the book, and it really is a huge part of the book, and it's not part of either movie so far. It could be in the second part 2 for the newer one, but Jean-Luc is pretty cool.
Yeah. We've been talking about this movie for 20 minutes, and we've barely talked about the movie. We've been talking about the books.
Yeah, no. We'll get through it. It's just there's not a.
No, I think that says something about the movie, though. It's just like I was like falling asleep. Like it really lost me.
Oh man. Okay. Well, one of my favorite scenes, because it's just so bad and poorly acted, is Dr. Yue, who's the
Diamond Head.
The one with the diamond. They don't touch on this on either book, but the reason why it's so significant that he was the traitor is he has the imperial conditioning. What that's supposed to mean is he's a doctor and he has this oath, but he is literally programmed to not be able to betray people who he's assigned to. But the mentats, which are human computers, so the guys with the giant eyebrows, they're called mentats, and basically
didn't get that either.
Yeah. So they are people who are from childhood are trained to basically be human computers, because basically like Terminator, like computers got crazy and like almost destroyed humanity, so they don't use computers anymore. Which I think is a really interesting way to do sci-fi, because for budget and everything, like I think that was kind of forward thinking for Frank Herbert to be like, yeah, computers will probably destroy the world someday, and he wrote this in the 50s. And then also, thinking, hey, if this is ever going to be made into a movie from a special effects standpoint, it's way easier to have a human than have all these like crazy computer things.
I wonder if that thought crossed his mind.
I don't know, but I think it's pretty interesting. But
yeah, definitely interesting.
Yeah, he was supposed to, the doctor guy is not supposed to be able to betray anybody, but the evil mentat that works for the Baron found a way around the programming, and it has major implications in the future books. But he betrays them, but he gives the Duke, he's like, I'm sorry, like I got you killed, and like your whole army and everybody is probably gonna die, but I'll give you a chance at revenge. He pulls his tooth out, gives him a fake tooth for gas, and he's just like, remember the tooth. Like they say tooth conservatively 78 times in about 2 minutes, and then he fucks it up. He's supposed to kill the Baron, and he just ends up killing the evil computer dude.
Yeah.
Ugh, it's so bad. And then I do want to give one positive thing. I think the worms look pretty tight in this movie.
Yeah, the worms are pretty tight. I like the triangular flaps on the mouth.
So do I. I actually really like that. I like that it's an interesting choice, and it looks cool, and the practical effects still actually look pretty solid.
Yeah, and I mean, the set design is gorgeous on this movie.
Yeah, I'd say the set design, the ships look really cool and interesting. It's just anything digital looks terrible. All the practical stuff looks great.
Yeah.
Even the costumes, I think, are pretty interesting. Too, yeah. Like visually, it's interesting, except for when they do digital effects.
Yeah.
God,
how about Sting? What'd you think of Sting?
So, how old do you think that character's supposed to be?
Well, these people live to be 500 years old or something, don't they?
Not really. I mean, you could. I don't know how old they actually end up being, but
I thought Sting's I remember Jessica, Paul's mom, saying that she had been training for hundreds of years or something.
No, she's not hundreds of years old. Not in the books, at least. Maybe in the movies. I don't remember.
How old is Sting in the movie? I think that Sting is 27.
He's supposed to be 17.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Paul, played by Kyle MacLachlan, is supposed to be 15.
Okay.
So
the 80s were crazy, man.
Yeah. Now, granted, in the book, there is a small time jump. He's supposed to be 15 at the beginning.
That makes Baron Harkonnen's lustful eyes a lot creepier.
Well, the thing is, the Baron actually this is the other thing that they do way better in this one than they did in the new one. But granted, I understand why they went away from it, because the Baron's supposed to be in the book they make him more gay, but he definitely has like raped women in the book. But he sleeps with slave boys, like he keeps slaves. And he fucks them and then kills them, very similar to what he does in this one. But he is actually like attracted to his nephew, who's Sting's character in the book. But he's also like kind of scared because Sting's character is supposed to be both smart and physically capable, where like the cousin is just kind of a dumb brute. Yeah. But I think they did a fantastic job with the Baron. He's very much like how he is in the books. He's very
in the new one or in 84.
Honestly, in both. Like they're different portrayals, but they're both kind of gross and evil and scary and swarmy. Yeah. And
I appreciate the swing that the 84 one was, as far as like being over the top and like chewing scenery. But it was grating on me.
I agree, but I think it's supposed to be like when you read the book. If you ever read the book, like any scene with the Baron, you're just like, oh God, I fucking hate this guy. It's so fucking gross. I think they're both really great portrayals. But that I do want to get to the newer one eventually, so I just kind of wanted to at least say some positive things. But it's weird. Like the pacing is pretty slow until it's not. Like once shit goes down, then it's just like everything goes. Oh, I'm in the desert. Oh, hey, there's the Fremen.
Yeah,
hey,
and
the Fremen are my friends now.
And that's not to say that like. I sorry, I'm trying to collect my thoughts. I agree, but that doesn't imply that like things pick up in an interesting way to me.
No,
to me, right. It just meant that they covered a lot of time very quickly. Like once he goes into the desert and becomes Lawrence of Arabia, it's just like, all right, six weeks have gone by and now he knows how to ride sandworms. Now 5 years have gone by and they've taken over the planet. And now, another 20 years or whatever.
Yeah, now he's defeated the Emperor. The Emperor's already conceded. Oh, wait, Sting wants to fight him. And then
now we're going to have a little fight at the end.
Yeah, it fights him. Sting's in his little underwears.
What's Sting's character? Fade Dunaway?
Fade Rotha.
Fade Rotha Dunaway.
Yeah, but that's it's not a good movie. Honestly, it's for the 80s, the limited technology and trying to get this into about a 2 to 2.5 hour runtime. I mean, it got a lot of the bones right, but the all the inner monologue
bones or no
things,
bones,
right? But the inner monologue thing was super. Like half the characters have times where they're just like, we hear their thoughts, and it's like intercut with their actual dialogue with the other characters, so it's like hard to track sometimes. It's weird.
Yeah, it's a big ambitious swing by a director who is maybe not the right fit, but is nonetheless interesting to watch no matter what he does.
Yeah, I agree. And like the original director, there's a great documentary. It's called
Jodorowsky's Dune.
Thank you. And it talks about his vision of the film, and it was going to be like this 10-hour just epic film, and it's tough to put on film, and I think
it's a fantastic documentary. Everybody should watch it.
It really is, and it all the art direction directly led to Star Wars. The guy who did all the spaceship designs, Ralph McQuarrie, went to go on and do Star Wars. He also did the designs for Alien, the ships and everything. It's super fascinating.
Just to go into it for just a second, Alejandro Jodorowsky, who did El Topo, Holy Mountain, blah, 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 Santa Sangre, was hired to make Dune, and he put together a crew, and they were like ready to start shooting it. He had all the crew in place, all these amazing people, and you have to watch it to figure out why it fell through. But his entire team got poached by other movies, and they went out to make the most influential space, sci-fi, fantasy movies that we know today. Like you said, Star Wars, Alien, whatever else.
Yeah, George Lucas, Ridley Scott would not be where they are today if it were not for him. So, yeah, like take that for what you will. But I mean, this definitely, I can see why this has a cult following. It's weird. We didn't even talk about Alia, the abomination, like the little toddler that speaks like a human, or a human like an adult, and has like all the Bene Gesserit powers. But yeah, it's a fucking trip.
Yeah. It's a trip. It's like a trip on spice melange.
Anything else you want to talk about before we jump into our next segment?
If there's a universal emperor, why are there even these like wars?
So
it gets explained in the movie, but that was one of my notes.
Yeah, it's super complicated, and like they don't, even as like complicated and convoluted as this one was, they left out like all the real reasoning and the little politics that go into it. Like it's very House of Cards, like politics in the books, like, but the first book is interspersed with a lot of like action and survival elements, which make it interesting, and it gets less so as the books go on.
Yeah. All right. That's all I have to say about it.
Cool. What have you been up to, bud?
Well, sir, I watched a movie called There's Someone Inside Your House on Netflix.
Oh.
Yeah, sort of a deconstruction of American slasher movies. It was pretty good. I recommend check it out if you're into horror movies. Not fantastic, but fun. Then I watched an Italian movie called A Classic Horror Story, which is another very meta deconstruction of horror movies. Really enjoyed that one.
Cool.
It's very like Midsommar meets Cabin in the Woods.
Huh.
I watched the Sopranos movie, Many Saints of Newark.
Cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed that quite a bit.
Good. I knew you were looking forward to that one.
Yeah. We've been watching King of the Hill.
Nice.
Which I started watching it when it first came out because I was all about Simpsons and Beavis and Butthead, so that felt like...
Yeah, you've been watching it for a few weeks now, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Really enjoying it. I've I wouldn't say I've come around on it because I was enjoying it from the beginning this time around. But in general, I've come around because I didn't really enjoy it when I was younger.
Nice.
I watched Halloween Kills. Did you see it yet?
Yeah. We talked about it.
I'm doing a thing for the podcast.
No,
guy.
I watched it. You don't need to ask. You can just
I'm setting it up so that we can talk about it.
But yes, I did watch it.
Podcast etiquette.
I think I liked it more than you did.
I didn't really like it.
I think it had some interesting ideas, but they kind of clashed with what was going on in the first movie.
Yeah, I mean, there was some interesting stuff in there, but I think any interesting stuff was ruined by how distracting the rest of the movie was.
I do want to give it one credit where, like, when I saw the trailer, I was like, dude, this just showed every fucking kill in the movie. But it really didn't. Like, it didn't show the context of it and everything. So I was expecting to know everything that happened going into it, and I was pleasantly surprised that the plot was different than what I thought it was going to be, and the kills were a little bit different than the way they were in the trailer. So I do want to give it that kudos.
I'm there next year for Halloween Ends, but I hope that it's better than the last one.
Yeah,
and I don't think that this was the worst entry in the series either. I'll say that.
Of course not. And we've talked about it. You know, we've covered a few slasher films on here, and you know that that's not necessarily my cup of tea. I'm not big into it, but I really liked the 2018.
Yeah, I really liked it too.
I don't like these type of movies, but I thought it was interesting, and I thought the kills were creative and not over the top, and I was actually really looking forward to this one, and I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, but I was a little disappointed.
I think I'm going to revisit it at some point, and I will say I appreciate that while the first one is a little bit more dreadful and suspense heavy, kind of like the original Halloween, I even if it wasn't executed in a way that worked for me, I appreciate that this one felt like a middle entry where it was just like, this is where shit goes nuts, and it like the pace didn't let up the entire time. Like it really
it didn't
kicked into gear immediately and kept it up.
It had like the reverse Lord of the Rings where it had like 10 openings versus like 10 endings, but once the 10 openings finished, then it kind of ripped.
Well, two things. One, I also watched Bloodsport, which is fun.
Cool.
But I wish I'd watched it when I was younger, because I think it would have made more of an impact on a younger mind. But it was cool.
It's a fun movie.
So many splits.
Him dancing.
But I don't want to get too far away from what you just said about Halloween, because that's an excellent segue into Dune. 10 fucking endings.
Yeah, no, it did.
No, we have to talk about what you watched, though.
Yeah, no, it's all good, man. I've been very busy this week, so I haven't watched a ton of stuff.
Good, right into Dune.
I mentioned that I was rewatching Daredevil a few weeks back. I took a break after season 1, but I started season 2, and the first time around, even with the Punisher, who's a character I really like, I thought it was significantly worse than season 1, but this time around I actually think it's just as good as season 1 of Daredevil.
What's the name of the actress, the redheaded lawyer who's also in True Blood?
Give me a second, I know it. Something Wolf.
Yeah, it's like Jessica or something.
God damn it.
Joanne.
Give me a second, I'm gonna look it up. God
Mary Jo Beth.
Mary Elizabeth Weinstein. No, it's not her.
She's good. I'd like to have her in a Marvel.
Deborah Ann Wall.
That's the one. I ran into her at Target once.
Nice.
Yeah,
Was she nice? Did you talk to her?
I didn't talk to her, but she is a pleasant elevator companion.
Oh, good. Good.
Anyway, go ahead.
But that's pretty much. I got a Switch because I got my new job has a lot of travel, and so I was like, I'll get a Switch. So I was playing a lot of Super Mario Odyssey last week as I was trying to learn the Switch. So
did you get Animal Crossing?
No, I got. I need to find all my games. My office is an absolute mess because I've been pulling stuff out and having to iron a bunch of clothes because I have an adult job again where I'm in the office. But no, I got Mario and I got Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild?
Yes, Breath of the Wild.
Huh. Sounds like a porno game.
Yep, it's pretty wild, man.
Cool.
But yeah, let's get into the new Dune.
All right.
Dune.
New Dune.
Dune Haas.
New Dune. Oh, man. All right. See you later. Click.
All right. Summarize this for me.
Jesus Christ. It's very similar to the first movie.
But better.
It is better. I agree. So there's, we focused on House Atreides, which is on the planet Caladan, and they're called in to take over the spice mining operation from House Harkonnen on the planet Arrakis. Arachnid. Turns out it was a trap, and the Imperium, they keep on saying, the Emperor and his regime are in line with the Harkonnens and are trying to wipe out the Atreides because they're becoming too ascendant and they pose a threat. It's less about aligning with the Harkonnens and more about weakening House Atreides. So the Emperor lends the Harkonnens a group of cyber space samurai guys, his elite troop, to go out and murder the entire Atreides family. And they almost succeed, but they leave Paul Atreides alive, and he's sort of exiled into the desert to escape from the Harkonnens who want to murder him. And the what are they called? The
Fremen,
the Sardukan, who are hot on his trail.
Yep.
Sardukan. Hate all these fucking names, man. And while he's out there, he learns the ways of the Fremen, the free men, and is welcomed into their tribe. And that's how the movie ends, on a big cliffhanger.
Yeah, it does.
That's good, right?
It's solid, really solid.
It's a hard movie to summarize.
It is, and
I think we usually go long on these summaries, but I really aim to have it done in like 3 sentences. Like I like to do like an extended log line. But this is a tricky one.
This one, I mean, it's a beautiful film.
Well, hold on. Before we even get into details, give me your overall opinion, 1 sentence.
I loved it. My only thing that I didn't like about it was, as somebody who read the book, not knowing where it was going to end, and as it kept going, I was like, oh, I want to see the next part. So it was a little unfulfilling, just because like I know where it's going, but like I understand why they had to do what they had to do. But I'm going to be fucking pissed if they don't make the sequel.
Yeah.
Like,
would you like to hear what I felt?
Yeah. But it's a pretty movie.
It is a pretty movie. Would you like to hear my short
I would love
reaction?
to hear it, man. Wait, let me be a gentleman and ask you, Alex. I have a lot of opinions about this movie, and I feel very strongly, as somebody who's new to the world of Dune. What did you feel about this version?
I absolutely enjoyed it as much as one possibly can when walking out of the theater feeling disappointed.
Right. No, that's a totally fair way of saying that. Like,
yeah.
Was the disappointment because you wanted more?
Yes. But also part of it is, well, no, sorry. I'm choosing my words here.
That's fair.
I think the tone of the movie hit me a little wrong. I think Denis' version of it feels so melodramatic. In the way the actors are acting, or he's choosing to direct them, and the score, which is like fucking incredible.
I love the score.
But the way that it's like peppered throughout the movie, just the notes that it's hitting, not like literal ABC notes, but like just the tones that it's striking, and like where it's placed throughout the movie, and the length, like the length of the movie, but just like the pacing of certain scenes,
I agree,
just makes it feel so like melodramatic and like borderline pretentious.
I don't think you're wrong. They definitely padded some stuff. Like there are stuff that's not in the books that they definitely wanted to give Oscar Isaac a little bit more to do,
which I appreciate. He's great.
Yeah. And they kind of beefed up Jessica in the beginning parts,
which I appreciate. She's great.
Yeah. So like everybody in this movie is fantastic. Like, and I can see why they wanted to give them more to do, but I do agree. Like it took them forever to get off of Kaladin. Forever.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I like about this movie is that we see more of Kaladin.
Yeah.
And it's a nice, I kind of thought about this afterwards, so I don't know how much it works in the experience of seeing the movie itself. But I think if I was making this movie, I would want to spend more time on Kaladin, just because it's such a lush, beautiful, familiar, but also otherworldly. Like
it looks like fucking Ireland, Scotland, beautiful.
Norway, I believe.
Yeah.
But it's like green and watery and blue. It's very earthy. So it's nice to spend a little bit of time there, and then you're just smashed into the fucking desert, and it's just orange for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of a cool way to do that transition, to like lull you into a sense of stability and then take you out.
It's like
so I like seeing more of that.
Wizard of Oz, going from bright to
exactly.
to dull.
Just in general, I liked seeing more of the planets, and like more. I guess Lynch has like these big wide shots, but they look very they look 2-dimensional.
I agree.
And Denis uses a bunch of these really sweeping, majestic wide shots, and there's much more of it's more majesty. It's bigger and more impressive.
I agree. I actually really love the score. I thought it was perfect.
I also love the score. I don't mean to say that I don't love the score.
No, I know what you mean. I thought it was perfect. Like
I think that when you have, sorry, go ahead.
I thought it hit hard when it needed to hit hard, and I thought it conveyed the emotions and the frenetic energy we're kind of supposed to feel, and the chaos.
Yeah.
And the chaos, even within their minds and their struggles that they're going through. So I thought it was perfect. And granted, I saw a making of, like, I got invited to this event where I got to see the trailer before it debuted, and I actually had seen the first 15 minutes of the movie before. And
I think it's worth noting I didn't watch any of the trailers for this. I went in fresh.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a little bit more, and like Hans Zimmer was supposed to do Tenet, but he decided like Dune is a bigger movie, and
I think he'd been wanting to do that like his entire career.
Yeah, and then with Denis, vision, he was just like, "There's no fucking way I'm not doing this." So like he had done like everything for Christopher Nolan for well over a decade, and broke off to do this. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think the music's fantastic. I think my my complaint stems from putting it in places where maybe it doesn't need to be, or since you brought up Nolan, there's a lot of like they're not flashbacks, they're like flash forwards, like visions or dreams in this movie. And again, I understand that's like part of the story. I think it's like baked into the book, but it's definitely part of Denis. Yeah, it's like the vision that Denis and also Frank Herbert had for this. So I know that that's part of it. But just like seeing Zendaya in the fucking desert when we don't know who her character is every 10 minutes and she just pops up, and then like there's a score over it. It's like, yeah. It's like, all right.
That's definitely in the book. Like he has multiple visions and he's like, yeah, there's this girl I'm going to fuck from my dreams.
So, I accept that that's probably on me. Like that's a part of this story.
Yeah, no, it's totally, it's a valid opinion. Yeah, I don't think your opinion is unwarranted.
And you mentioned Nolan. That's why I brought it up. And part of the reason that doesn't, the flash forward dream sequence stuff doesn't really work for me is because we've seen, for instance, Nolan do that. We've seen so many directors do that. So many movies do that. Where it's kind of like parody at this point. And that's a fucked up thing about the history of Dune, is that it influenced all of modern sci-fi, right?
Yeah.
Like we're talking about with Jodorowsky's Dune, but it was never properly made. And I don't think the book was, it's fair to say that the book was never nearly as mainstream as Star Wars was.
Absolutely.
So you have all these things, all these elements that come from this one book that have been done in other properties. And when the book is done any justice with a movie 80 years later or whatever, everything feels like it's been done, like it's cliche.
That's totally fair. No, you're not wrong at all. Like that is absolutely true. Yeah. I mean, just from a visual standpoint, obviously this movie is out almost 50 years later, but it is 40 years later, but it's God, it's a beautiful movie. And
the score and the cinematography, and the set design and the costumes are fucking
the costumes
gorgeous.
Are gorgeous. But the thing that really got me is like the ship design. Not all the ships, but like specifically the desert, like the ornithopters, like essentially they're helicopters. Those
thopters,
are exactly how I pictured them the first time I read the book. Like
that's cool.
It's almost eerie, like somebody got into my brain and took a snapshot of what I pictured.
That's awesome.
Really cool.
There are so many shots of spaceships landing in this movie, by the way.
But they're cool.
They're very cool. If I had spaceships that cool, I'd shoot all of them landing.
I didn't really like, and they don't touch on it, and it's really tricky, but there's like lasers in this one. And they're supposed to be. Like the Dune universe has
lasers more often, by the way.
Well, so there's a reason why they don't. So, and they don't touch on it, but the shields are much better in this one. And I really liked how they did in the first movie. They are like, oh, the slow blade pierces the shield kind of thing. And then there's a point where there's like a gun that has like a corkscrew bullet that can get through shields. But in this, they visually showed like as the thing was going slow, the shield would turn red and it would start to vibrate and everything, which I thought was cool. But if a laser hits a shield in the book, it creates like the equivalent of a nuclear explosion.
Yeah.
So that was actually a problem that I had with this, was how often they used lasers. Like a laser was not something you wanted to use if you don't know where their shields. Now, granted, they took the giant shields down that took, care of the buildings.
Right.
But they don't know that there aren't humans running around with shields on, and that laser could have hit a human and fucking blew up everything. But who knows how that's going to work in this version. The other thing is nobody really uses shields on Arrakis because they actually attract worms.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting. They didn't say that.
Yeah. So, it's, but I mean, some of the things, I do want to say there's a few things in this that they changed from the book that I actually like better. So, Dr. Lyot Kynes, who's the archaeologist, in the book, in the first movie, it's a dude. In this one, it's played by a woman of color, and I think she does a great job. But her death is significantly better than the book. I don't even think you see the death in the original one. But in the book, they just drop him in the desert, and they're like, "Oh, the worms will get him." But he gets dropped on a place where the sand is starting to like ferment, and it has like a ton of energy in it, and it explodes and just kills him. And this, she calls a worm by banging on the sand to help her kill all the bad soldiers. I thought that was really. I actually liked that way better than the book. I thought that was a really great way to do that.
I think we're into spoilers now, but spoiler alert if you haven't seen it yet. The way she gets stabbed or killed, I guess, in that scene, I thought was pretty cool too. I especially like seeing the water spurt out of her suit, out of her camelback.
That was a really cool little detail. I loved that. I was like, whoa.
I think
that was really cool.
Just in general, I love that the women had so much more to do in this movie, both like physically with fighting and stuff, but also in the story. Like they're just much more present, had much more agency.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I also thought Jessica Ferguson was great, and they really kind of beefed up her role.
Rebecca Ferguson.
Yeah, Rebecca Ferguson, Jessica, the character. She was fantastic, and I thought she played really well with Timothée Chalamet. But when they announced Timothée Chalamet as Paul, from a look wise, I was like, oh, that's really good. He looks young. He looks like he could be under 18. Believe it or not, I haven't seen him in anything prior to this.
I actually haven't seen Call Me by Your Name or
that, or the son, the good son, or not the good son, whatever. Beautiful Boy where he plays Steve Carell's son. I actually think he looks a lot like Steve Carell at certain angles. I thought that's actually really good casting for a movie we're not talking about. But I thought he did fine.
I did see him in something else where he's got like a bit part. I can't remember what it is now. But yeah, this is the first time I've really like taken him in on screen. And he was pretty good. I liked it.
I thought he was great. He did even though he's like a scrawny, they make a joke about how scrawny he is. I thought he did the action scenes very well, and he was, stoic where he needed to be, and he looked scared when he needed to. Like, I thought he did a really good job.
I'm curious which half of the movie you liked more. I enjoyed the second half more. The first half felt very similar to Lynch's movie. Like some of the lines are the same, and I assume that it's just the same lines from the book. Yeah. But and the way it's paced, just like, oh wow, this is like almost word for word what Lynch was doing. So that was a little annoying. But as far as Timothée Chalamet is concerned, this annoyed me in the movie, and I've kind of forgiven it after the fact. But during the movie, it felt like he was being very whiny and mopey, and like, I don't like to use this term as a pejorative, but like emo, like what people mean when they say that.
He's like that in the book. Like that's actually very accurate.
Yeah, exactly. And like when I came out of the movie, I was like, well, that makes sense, right? He's supposed to be very young. He's this like put upon, he's burdened with greatness, basically. And like Luke Skywalker was a pain in the ass in the first Star Wars movie. Like that makes sense for that character, I guess. And
I actually really liked that they touched upon the point where like he has some animosity against his mom that's not really in the books. Like he's very protective of the mom, and he knows, like he's very smart. So, and it's not mentioned in this, but he was secretly being trained. Like his parents were training him to be a Mentat, and then she was also training him to be basically a male Bene Gesserit.
Did you notice that his mom was like secretly training him for a little bit of sex in this movie?
Was she?
There's a little bit of sexual tension.
Oh.
There's like, I don't know if it's meant to be there or not, but I picked up on some stuff. There's that scene where they're first in the desert and they put on their camelbacks and they're like facing away from each other, and they kind of look back over their shoulders like, I wonder what's going on back there.
I think that's supposed to be more about distrust and fear, because she's so in the book, and she's supposed to be afraid of him as he starts developing his powers, because it pretty much as soon as he gets to Arrakis, his dreams start becoming more powerful, and he starts figuring things out. And they touch upon like he just naturally knew how to put the still suit on in a very specific tribal way, kind of thing.
The idea is like once he gets to Arrakis, there's the planet is sort of calling out to him, and he starts becoming who he's chosen to be. That feels like a good place for them to pick up at the beginning of the first movie, is that there's this like new distrust between mother and son. Yeah.
And I'm glad that they kind of put that. I think it makes a ton of sense. He kind of resents her, like, you fucking turned me, you wanted to be me to be the chosen one kind of thing, and you kind of fucked me up. It's a pretty fucked up situation. I think my favorite thing, and I think Jason Momoa did a great job as Duncan Idaho. I didn't expect. I thought it was going to be really bad. He was Jason Momoaing about, but that character,
he was good. I'm just tired of that guy.
But he so buckle in. If this franchise does well, he becomes the lead eventually.
So he's not dead?
Do you want me to spoil it for you?
I mean, didn't you just do it?
I can tell you what.
No, don't. It's all right. I know he comes back. That's enough.
Yeah, but no, he eventually kind of comes the lead. I do like how this movie teased a few things, like in the vision, you saw the baby.
Can we sidebar for just a second?
Yeah.
I'm getting a little tired. This is the source of my animosity for Jason Momoa just now. He did a good job in this. I'm getting a little tired of how many franchises these A-list actors are getting. And I agree. Oscar Isaac is a prime suspect here.
Oh, he's doing so many fucking things. Star Wars he's now got the Marvel
Moon
thing.
Knight. Yeah. Moon Knight, I love that guy. I like seeing him and stuff, but I feel like I might connect with like Dune, for instance, if there was like not recognizable faces in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, granted, everybody is excellent in this, but I do get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I absolutely do.
Yeah, Jason Momoa is the other one in this movie.
Even Josh
it's
Brolin.
Such a common... Yeah, exactly.
Who I love. Josh Brolin
there's a couple scenes where he's like yelling, and I was like, oh, Thanos.
Yeah, Josh Brolin is one of my favorite actors. I think he's underappreciated. He's in a lot. I think he's appreciated a lot more now. But there was a period of time where it's like he wasn't doing a ton of movies. He would pop up in a movie every year or so, and he was really fucking great. And now he's in a lot of things. But yeah, no, I do agree with you that, some of these people are in a little bit of everything.
Too many franchises, that's all.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. But
go ahead, though.
I think to start wrapping this one up, it's really hard to talk about these movies because they're so dense. But I thought the action was incredible, and so Duncan Idaho went out like a bitch in the first movie. Like, they're just in the montage of the attacks, he just kind of jumps on a few people and then gets shot. So the Sardaukar, who are the Emperor's soldiers, just as a really quick background, in the book and in the original movie, I don't even think they're mentioned in the original movie, but they are supposed to be stronger than most people. Like, essentially one of those guys are supposed to be as strong and capable as like 5 dudes. Right. And the reason why the Emperor's afraid is the Atreides is actually training an army that is actually as strong, if not stronger, than the Sardaukar. In the book, they just started it, and so they only have a small force that's as good as them, but they're working on making the whole army stronger. And in the book, they don't want the Emperor. Nobody wants the Emperor to be complicit in this. So they actually wear Harkonnen clothes to blend in. In this, they just were like out in the open, but Duncan Idaho is supposed to be the greatest fighter in the galaxy and is capable of fighting, more than a dozen. And I get that vibe from this. Yeah. And I thought they did it in such a way that it was believable that he was, as good of a fighter as he was. But he still got like a noble death. And I really thought that scene was very effective.
Yeah, I dig that scene.
But yeah.
So if they do another one of these, and hopefully they do, but as of yet they haven't announced a sequel, which feels kind of insane. It's Denis Villeneuve, and it's so many huge actors. Why wouldn't you just say we're doing all 3?
Because he hasn't made us outside of Arrival. I don't. None of his movies have been financially successful. Blade Runner was a bomb.
That's fair.
Although Blade Runner 2049 is a fucking beautiful movie. I fucking love that movie too.
I know Denis also. Yeah, me too. Denis also. Well, it's beautiful. Denis has said that he wouldn't have signed on to do this movie unless they let him make more. And it says at the beginning of the movie, part 1.
Part 1, yeah.
So they're really hedging their bets that they're going to be able to do more.
I really hope they do. He said it's ready to go. If it gets greenlit, he can shoot it within 60 days, get it going. Wow. So
it's made $5.1 million on Thursday and part of Friday,
which is a really big preview showing because they're only doing shows from like 5 o'clock on. My show, every showing was sold out. So I mentioned I started my new job. I was trying to decide where I was going to go based off my commute. And I had tickets at one thing, but I ended up canceling my COVID test. So I went to Burbank, but pretty much every screening in Southern California was sold out yesterday.
Wow.
So I'm really hoping it does well. Just to wrap up the movie, he finds the Fremen, and there's one Fremen who's like, nah, fuck this kid. He's an outsider. And he fucks him up. He kills him.
In the third ending.
Yeah, he kills him. And Stilgar, played by Javier Bardem, is like, you're tight. Your mom's tight. She kind of fucked me up. you guys are welcome. And Zendaya was like, damn, man, you fucked that guy up. You should put it in me.
Very good. Very concise.
Yeah.
I'm curious, if they make the second one, who are they going to cast as the Emperor, and also Fade Dunaway?
Yeah, the Fade one is the one that I'm really interested about who they're going to be. I don't know who I'd want to be in it.
Yeah, I feel like those are going to be big names.
And honestly, the Emperor isn't that big in the book. Like that one,
sure, but it's such like in the world of the story that role holds so much prominence, like being the Emperor of the known universe or whatever.
Yeah,
I just feel like they're going to get like some, some legacy actor.
Yeah, Sir Michael Caine,
Kyle MacLachlan. No,
that would be funny if they did that. I'm also interested in who they end up casting as the princess, who he ends up, marrying. I'm curious as to because she's in the subsequent books. But yeah, I'm really interested in who they cast for that. They already have the most prominent Fremen people out there, so there's really the only big characters we need is the Emperor, Fade, and whoever the princess is going to be. Yeah.
Hopefully we see, man. I hope that the next 2 movies, I guess, get made. It sounds like they could do 10 of these if they wanted to, based on the books.
They can make a ton. The next 2 books, Dune Messiah and Children of Dune, are significantly shorter. Those could each be 1 movie. Mm-hmm. There's not as much going on. It's just more political thriller kind of thing. So, they can definitely get a few more out of these. They're making a TV show too called about the Ben Gesserit. I can't remember what it's called. So they're going to be making some other stuff for this, but I think it goes without saying, based off our conversation, we both think that this was a worthy reboot. That this absolutely needed a reboot and a modern telling with better special effects and more faithful to the source material and just better acting. Like, I think this checks all the box of what a remake should be, like a true remake, not a reboot, but an actual remake. It's up there. I think it's great, and I really hope we see more.
Yeah, agreed. And just from a bigger perspective, I'm glad that there is hard space fantasy, hard sci-fi fantasy being made. I think that's really cool. Like, this movie expects you to pay attention.
Oh, the worms were cool too. We didn't see them quite as much as we did in the first movie.
They look like big eyeballs, but also anuses.
Yeah, they look like sphincters with teeth.
I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that I feel like I need to get out there. There's a whole lot of stuff here we didn't talk about, as far as like Arrakis being the Middle East and the spices oil and white savior stuff, and
no, absolutely,
you're rooting for the lesser fastest in future space Nazi Germany.
Well, that goes without saying, Alex.
I want to say Sarsgaard is really good as
he's great.
I like the way he floats. Overall, his design is very interesting.
I hated the flying.
I enjoyed it, and I also think that he resembles like Brando as Colonel Kurtz.
Yeah.
Or, Dr. Moreau.
Yeah, no, I agree. So just the floating. So he's supposed to be so fat that his legs can't support his weight, so he has an anti-gravity harness, but it's supposed to just be enough to lift his bulk so he can walk, but he has kind of like a bouncy walk because of the anti-gravity. Mm-hmm. He's not supposed to fly. And in both movies he flies. Yeah. I was kind of disappointed that they didn't ground that. Ground that. That's pretty good. I was a little disappointed. I was a little disappointed he didn't. It looks cool. The poisoning scene was way gnarlier in this, and it kind of hurt the bear, and he's like stuck up on the ceiling for a bit. That was pretty funny.
Yeah.
But no, it's a great movie. It's on HBO Max.
Go see it.
Definitely watch it, but
see it in IMAX if you can.
Yeah, watch it in theaters if you can. Pro tip for people who are still worried about COVID, it's totally understandable. If you book the movie like 20, 30 minutes before it goes, the handicap companion seats are almost always available, and they generally will have a gap. So if you're concerned, do that. But that's it. Alex, where can our listeners find you?
Before we go, I just want to have a moment of silence for Helena Hutchins, who was killed this week.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
She was a cinematographer on this movie that was shooting with Alec Baldwin.
Rust.
And there's a misfire on a prop gun that killed her and injured the director. She's a cinematographer and a member of Local 600. And Shit like that should not be happening.
Nobody should be dying for movies. As much as we love movies, nobody should be dying to make a movie.
Yeah. Prop guns, offsets, only airsoft, whatever. Just get live firearms off of sets. No more. Shit happened in 1993 with Brandon Lee.
And he wasn't even the first one. It's happened before. At this point, they CGI muzzle flashes all the time. They CGI blood. Why do we need these anymore? I don't get it.
And furthermore, if you've been hearing about the IATSE potential strike that's floating around, this is exactly what it's talking about. There were, I think, 5 or 6 crew members that walked off the set that morning because there was repeated violations of safety protocols on that set. And they were replaced with non-union scab workers. And that's why this fucking accident happened. So we on this podcast support a strike, and hopefully nothing like this ever happens again.
Katrina, my wife, has been she's part of SAG, but she's been picketing in solidarity for some of the events over the weekend. She's went and made signs for people. We have her car painted all up with the IATSE symbol and whatnot. But no, it's really important. There's actually a strike going on at Kellogg's somewhere else, and then we'll get to the moment of silence because we absolutely have to honor this individual, because it's frankly just abysmal and stupid and horrendous that this happened. But there is a strike that's happening at a Kellogg's plant, and they try to get scab workers in, but then the bus drivers saw the picketers, and they decided not to cross the picket line. The bus wouldn't cross it with the scab workers. I heard that they're working on actually getting the first Amazon union up in on the East Coast somewhere. But we desperately need a labor movement in this country. It's absurd what's going on.
Yeah.
So we'll take a moment of silence, because nobody should be as much. We obviously love movies. We spend hours every month talking about movies together, and I would never watch a movie again if that meant nobody had to die for these.
Yeah. And I think, in fact, let's take a moment of silence, and then let's end the podcast. I don't want to promote myself after that.
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, same thing.
Thanks for listening. Let's keep movies safe.
Yep. Thanks for listening.